It started with a whisper, an unheard cry lost in the wind. No one saw it coming, yet they had all played a part in its creation. A vengeance so quiet, so patient, that by the time they noticed, it was far too late. In the town of Black Hollow, where shadows stretched long and secrets festered beneath the surface, a group of 6 friends held dominion over fear. They weren't just popular, they were untouchable. Lucas, the cunning ringleader, had a sharp tongue that cut deeper than any blade. Melissa, with her porcelain beauty and venomous words, thrived on cruelty masked as charm. Daniel, the muscle of the group, enjoyed inflicting pain as much as receiving applause. Jenna, Simon, and Claire followed suit. Loyal to the game of torment they played so well. And their favorite target? A quiet boy named Eli. Eli wasn't just another outcast. He was a shadow in the hallways, a ghost among the living. His presence was acknowledged only when it served as a source of amusement. They pushed, they laughed, they mocked, but Eli never reacted. He never fought back. His silence to them was weakness. Then one day, Eli was gone. No one knew where he went. No one cared to ask. His absence was nothing more than an empty desk, a space that soon filled with another victim for their cruel entertainment. But then, strange things began happening. It started small. Lucas woke up one night to find his phone flooded with messages from an unknown number. The messages contained nothing but static, an endless sequence of distorted noise. Then came the whispering. So faint at first he thought it was his imagination. But soon it grew, a chilling murmur that followed him wherever he went. Melissa found her mirror cracked without explanation, her reflection distorted into something grotesque. Daniel's car engine sputtered and died on a deserted road, leaving him stranded in the dead of night. Jenna swore she saw someone standing outside her window, silent, unmoving, eyes too hollow to be human. It was Claire who first spoke their fear out loud. Something isn't right. Their unease was met with laughter at first, nervous, uncertain. But as the days passed, the laughter faded. They were being watched, stalked, haunted by something unseen, yet undeniably present. Then came the first real warning. One evening, Simon's parents found him in his room, shaking, pale, unable to speak. His laptop screen flickered with a grainy video. The footage showed their own high school, the very corridors where their cruelty had thrived. But something was off. The place looked abandoned, dark, wrong. A faint figure lurked in the background, barely visible in the poor quality of the video. The whispering returned, no longer a distant murmur, but a piercing hiss that made his skin crawl. Simon never returned to school. The remaining 5 sought comfort in one another, but their unity was cracking under the weight of paranoia. Every night brought new horrors. Objects moving on their own, doors creaking open in the dead of night, messages carved into their walls with no signs of forced entry. Then came the laughter, not their own, but something else, a distorted, hollow echo of amusement that sent shivers down their spines. Lucas, desperate to reclaim control, attempted to brush it off as a prank. "Someone's messing with us," he said, voice shaking despite his forced bravado. "We just have to find out who." But deep down they all knew this wasn't a prank. This was Eli, or rather, what was left of him, and he was finally speaking. Fear had a way of creeping in slowly, sinking its claws deeper with each passing day. At first, they had tried to deny it, brushed off the strange occurrences as coincidences, paranoia, or an elaborate prank. But now, they knew better. Eli was back, or at least something that had once been Eli. The group, now reduced to 5 after Simon's breakdown, clung to their fragile sense of control. But the silence had changed. It had become heavy, oppressive, suffocating. They no longer laughed when they were together. Their voices were hushed, their gazes darting around nervously, always searching for something unseen. And then, one by one, they started unraveling. Melissa's torment. Melissa was the first to break. She had always prided herself on her beauty, on the effortless charm that drew others toward her. But the mirror in her bedroom had turned against her. It started subtly at first. Her reflection seemed delayed, a fraction of a second slower than her movements. Then it began distorting, her face elongating, her features twisting into something monstrous. One night, as she brushed her hair, the reflection stopped mimicking her. It stared. Melissa's breath caught in her throat as she watched her mirrored self tilt its head, its lips curling into a grin she hadn't made. Slowly, its hand rose, pressing against the glass. Only, it wasn't mirroring her anymore. It was reaching for her. The lights flickered, and when they stabilized, the reflection was normal again. But Melissa had already screamed loud enough for her parents to come running. She tried explaining, but they found no cracks, no signs of tampering. They called it stress, a breakdown. Melissa knew better. She stopped looking into mirrors after that. Daniel's descent. Daniel, always the tough one, tried to play it off as nonsense. "It's just in your heads," he said, but the unease in his eyes betrayed him. And then one night, he heard knocking, 3 sharp raps against his bedroom door. He assumed it was his mother, but when he called out, there was no response. He hesitated before getting up, gripping a baseball bat just in case. When he opened the door, the hallway was empty, but the knocking continued, this time from inside his closet. His breath hitched. He stepped back, debating whether to open it or run. But before he could decide, the door creaked open on its own, and in the darkness beyond, something breathed, a low, shuddering gasp, as if whatever was inside had been waiting for this moment. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Jenna's visitor, Jenna the skeptic, had scoffed at the idea of ghosts. But then she started receiving letters. Not emails, not texts, actual handwritten letters, slipped under her bedroom door at night. They contained no threats, no demands, only the same sentence, repeated over and over again in shaky, erratic handwriting. "You should have listened." At first, she tried throwing them away, but no matter what she did, they kept coming. And then one night, she woke up to find a figure standing at the foot of her bed. A boy, thin, silent, motionless, his head tilted ever so slightly, his face obscured by the darkness. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. The room felt frozen, the air thick with something unnatural. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone. The next morning, Jenna packed a bag and left town without telling anyone. The last 3. Now, only 3 remained: Lucas, Melissa, and Daniel. The fear had settled into their bones, poisoning every waking moment. They didn't talk about it anymore. They didn't need to. They knew something was coming, and it wouldn't stop until it had taken them all. There was no running, no hiding, no begging for mercy. Eli's silence had been his greatest torment in life. Now, in death, it had become his most terrifying weapon. Melissa, Daniel, and Lucas were the last ones left, and they were barely holding on. The sleepless nights, the unseen presence, the whispers just beyond the edge of hearing. It had eroded their sanity like water carving through stone. They no longer cared about school, about their reputations. None of that mattered now. Survival was all they had left. But deep down, they knew survival wasn't an option. Melissa's fate, Melissa's breaking point came first. She had locked herself in her room, refusing to step outside, convinced that if she just stayed put, she could outlast this nightmare. She had triple-checked the locks, covered the mirrors, sealed every crack where a shadow might creep through. It didn't matter, because Eli didn't need doors. That night, she heard a soft creak from her closet, the one she had barricaded with her dresser. Her breath hitched. She hadn't touched it in days. The air in the room turned thick, suffocating. Then a whisper, low, distant, yet right next to her ear. "Why did you do it?" Melissa's heart slammed against her ribs. The room darkened, the single lamp flickering violently. She scrambled out of bed, her hands trembling as she tried to turn the doorknob, locked. The whisper came again, colder this time. You laughed while I suffered. Her dresser began to shake violently, as though something inside the closet was clawing to get out. The wooden panels groaned, the hinges rattled. Then, silence. Melissa barely had a moment to process before the closet door burst open, the force sending her stumbling backward. The lights went out, and the screaming began. When her parents found her the next morning, Melissa was curled up in the corner of her room, eyes vacant, body convulsing. She wouldn't speak, wouldn't respond, just an empty shell of the girl she once was. They took her away, but everyone knew. Melissa was already gone. Daniel's reckoning. Daniel ran. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away. He drove for hours, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. But no matter how far he went, the feeling remained. The suffocating weight of unseen eyes, the whispers crawling under his skin. Then his radio crackled to life. Static at first, then a voice. Not Eli's. His own. You think you can escape? Daniel's breath hitched. His hands shook as the radio continued, his own voice mocking him, laughing at him. You're just a scared little boy, Daniel. Just like he was. Then the car engine died. The headlights flickered, the darkness swallowing the road ahead. He fumbled with his phone, but the screen remained black, unresponsive. And then, in the rearview mirror, he saw it. A shape in the back seat. Thin, silent. Daniel's scream never left his throat. They found his car the next day, abandoned on the side of the road. The driver's seat was empty, the door left wide open. Daniel was never seen again. Lucas, the last one standing. Lucas had always been the leader, the one who dictated who suffered and who was spared. But now he was alone. His reflection no longer matched his movements. His shadow stretched unnaturally long, even in the dimmest light. And the silence. Oh, the silence was deafening. Every creak in the floorboards made his breath catch. Every whisper of wind felt like a breath against his neck. Then one night, the silence finally broke. It's time. Lucas turned, but the room was empty. The air turned ice cold. His breath came out in shuddering gasps as his vision blurred, dark figures shifting at the edges of his sight. He ran, through the halls, down the stairs, out into the night. But the town was empty. The street lights flickered. The buildings loomed like hollow husks, abandoned and forgotten. Then he saw them. Melissa, standing motionless, her face devoid of life. Daniel, staring with empty eyes. Jenna, Simon, Claire, all of them, standing in the middle of the street, silent, waiting, and behind them, Eli. His face was pale, his eyes dark voids of nothingness. He raised a single hand, and the world collapsed. The final silence. Lucas was found in his home the next morning. He was breathing, but he wasn't there. His mind was gone, lost to whatever nightmare had claimed him in the night. The doctor said he was unresponsive. His parents wept. The town whispered. But some nights, when the silence grew too thick, if you listened closely, you could hear the faintest trace of laughter and a whisper. Now you understand.